BBC News. It starts at 7 o'clock this evening. But right now it's time for the news where you are. Goodbye.
Tonight on Reporting Scotland, Humza Yousaf stands by his predecessor. The First Minister says he will not suspend Nicola Sturgeon from the SNP following her arrest and release in connection with the investigation into the party's funding and finances.
Do you think she should be suspended from the SNP?
Yes, I do.
Hunza's got a lot to think about, so, there's other more important things to be done.
Also tonight, the grieving mum whose vulnerable daughter was able to walk out of her hospital ward.
There needs to be more staff. The staff need to be trained better. They need to be more compassionate, and maybe they need to be looked after better so that they can look after their patients better.
Samantha's daughter Jade was found dead 11 days later. The Health Board has given the family a full apology. The country's first battery-powered HGV begins making deliveries of whisky.
And coming up in the sport, a former Scotland manager says the team's victory over Spain will terrify future opponents ahead of this weekend's European Championship qualifier against Norway.
Hello, I'm Laura Miller. Welcome to Monday's programme. Nicola Sturgeon won't be suspended from the party she led for almost 9 years, says First Minister Humza Yousaf. This despite calls from within the SNP for her to be suspended or voluntarily step aside. It follows the former First Minister's arrest and release yesterday by police investigating the funding and finances of the party. Here, with all the day's developments, is our political correspondent David Wallace-Lockhart.
Just a matter of months ago, but a different political age. Nicola Sturgeon, the undisputed figurehead of the SNP. Now, off the back of her arrest and release, she faces calls to step aside from her own party while the police investigation into SNP finances runs its course. Some of those calls come from her own side. Ash Regan ran to be party leader this year and was a minister under Nicola Sturgeon.
She will see that this is causing a distraction to and damage, I guess, as well to the party, but also to the government. And so I think the right course of action would be for her to temporarily and voluntarily resign her party membership until this can be cleared up.
Michelle Thompson says she was told to step aside while property deals she was connected to were investigated. No wrongdoing was found. She believes the party rules aren't consistent.
There was a process when Nicola Sturgeon was the First Minister where, regardless of the presumption of innocence, people were forced to step down from the whip. And it's that I'm picking up on, because if that was to be the case for 8 years or so when Nicola Sturgeon was First Minister, why then would that process not apply to herself?
Nicola Sturgeon's arrest follows that of her husband, the former SNP Chief Executive Peter Murrow, and the then SNP Treasurer Colin Beattie, both in April.
I'm delighted to officially
opening a treatment centre in Inverness this afternoon, the First Minister stuck by his political mentor.
I will treat Nicola Sturgeon no differently than I've treated, for example, Colin Beattie or indeed others. She has been released without charge, and I think it's so important that presumption of innocence is upheld.
Opposition leaders warn that internal SNP controversy sucks oxygen away from day-to-day governance.
This is a party that is mired in scandal, mired in division, that's trying to get by day, and instead we are seeing an incompetent and dysfunctional SNP government at a time when we need true leadership.
She should be suspended, and the fact is Humza Yousaf is refusing to do this because of course he was Nicola Sturgeon's pick to be the replacement to her as leader of the SNP, and he is too weak to stand up to her now.
In a statement yesterday, Nicola Sturgeon said, "Innocence is not just a presumption I'm entitled to in law. I know beyond doubt that I am in fact innocent of any wrongdoing." The former First Minister has described recent events as deeply distressing, a contrast to the political successes of her leadership. Her successor is standing by her, even if some colleagues think she should leave the stage for now.
So, what precedent is there for prominent SNP members being suspended while allegations against them are looked at? Well, Colin Beattie stepped down as the party's treasurer after he was arrested and released without charge. Humza Yousaf says Mr Beattie is innocent until proven guilty. He remains an SNP MSP. Alex Salmond resigned his membership after he was investigated over sexual harassment claims. He was cleared in a criminal trial but never returned to the SNP and now leads the rival Alba party. Others have also willingly given up their party affiliation, like the former MP Natalie McGarry, who was jailed for embezzlement. At the time, Nicola Sturgeon said her resigning the whip during the police investigation was the right thing to have done. But resignations are not always voluntarily. Consider Margaret Ferrier. She lost the SNP whip after admitting she breached coronavirus laws back in 2020. So, what do some people in Nicola Sturgeon's Glasgow South constituency want to happen to her SNP membership?
Just because the police have you in for question doesn't mean it's wrong.
Do you think she should be suspended from the SNP?
No.
Hunza's got a lot to think about, so, there's other more important things to be done.
Do you think she should be suspended from the SNP?
Yes, I do. She's suspended people in the past for far less.
If the charges are there and if they're confirmed, only then the decision should be made.
OK, well, let's take stock of all of this now with David Wallace-Lockhart. Is it a surprise, David, that Humza Yousaf is backing Nicola Sturgeon?
I don't think it is, no. The pair are close political allies. When he ran for the SNP leadership, he was widely seen as her preferred candidate. It's also quite a febrile political situation here, and the idea of suspending the whip from Nicola Sturgeon, telling her she can't represent the SNP right now, would in many ways be pouring petrol on a bit of a political bonfire. What's more awkward for Humza Yousaf is people are questioning the consistency of the approach here, and you went through some of the examples where people have and haven't been suspended. But what he can say is, well, I've only recently taken over as SNP leader. He's not suspended anyone who's under investigation, and therefore he can argue that his approach to this is consistent.
And how significant do you think it is that MSPs in her own party are calling for her to step aside?
I don't think Nicola Sturgeon will be feeling a huge amount of pressure about the idea of having to step aside. If we look at the two MSPs who spoke to us today, who went on the record saying that she should step aside currently, Ash Regan is the better known of the two. She ran for the SNP leadership earlier this year. She only got 11% of the vote, so perhaps not the most influential voice within the party. But where it is more awkward for Humza Yousaf, where it is more awkward for the SNP, is how normalised the idea of perhaps speaking out against some of the leadership's positions is becoming in that party. That's something we're kind of seeing more and more of recently. Those sort of people speaking out around a year ago would have been quite unthinkable. And I think it speaks to perhaps the problems with discipline in the party and the more difficult political culture that Humza Yousaf has to oversee at the moment. OK, David, thank you. Well, there's been political drama at Westminster too in the wake of Boris Johnson's resignation as an MP. This is over the report looking into whether he misled MPs about parties during lockdown in Number 10. In a resignation letter, Boris Johnson was also critical of his successor, Rishi Sunak. To date, the Prime Minister responded. Well, let's get more on this now from our Westminster correspondent, David Porter. David, this is linked to Boris Johnson's resignation honours list.
Yes, it is. And what we're seeing tonight is a full-scale slanging match between the present Prime Minister and his predecessor, but one specifically over that question of the resignation honours list and all the controversy that has gone with it. Now, it is nothing new that Prime Ministers and those who come after them don't always see eye to eye. But usually, if they are of the same party, they deal with their differences in quiet or through proxies. Like, for instance, you didn't see David Cameron criticising Theresa May, nor did you see Tony Blair laying into Gordon Brown. So this is all pretty unusual, and we have them tonight. Basically, the war of words is continuing. It is also worth, I think, drawing some parallels between what is happening down here at Westminster and what's happening in Scotland. With everything that has happened over the last 72 hours, both Rishi Sunak and Humza Yousaf could be forgiven for thinking that their predecessors, in one way or another, intentionally or perhaps unintentionally in some cases, have managed to torpedo their own agendas. For both men, this is a distraction they could really do without.
OK, David Porter at Westminster, thank you. A hospital ward, a place of safety that also needs to be secure for the patient and in some cases for others. Well, now a BBC investigation has looked at the number of patients who wander out of hospital wards. From the health boards who replied to it, that number stood at 6,493. And nearly all health boards don't record how many absconding patients are treated for their mental health. Jade McGrath went missing from her ward. She went on to take her own life. Her mum Samantha wants more to be done to keep patients safe. Gordon Blackstock has been speaking to her.
Samantha Taylor's daughter was just 19 when she was admitted to New Craig's Hospital in Inverness. Jade McGrath had begun hallucinating after a history of self-harm dating back to her school days. 4 days into her treatment, Jade left the hospital without permission. She wasn't in a locked ward.
So eventually they started looking for her. We know from the CCTV what time she walked out of the hospital. It was around 2:47 p.m. And we know the phone call to the police to report her missing was made 45 minutes after she walked out.
Jade's body was found 11 days later. She had killed herself. An investigation by NHS Highland found a catalogue of failures. The health board apologised and paid compensation to the family. But Samantha says more needs to be done to keep patients safe.
In this country, there's hundreds of families in the same situation as us. To me, the NHS, OK, they're fantastic at physical ailments, but when it comes to mental health or mental illness, obviously there needs to be more funding. There needs to be more staff. The staff need to be trained better. They need to be more compassionate, and maybe they need to be looked after better so that they can look after their patients better.
Most health boards don't record how many patients who go missing are being treated for mental health issues. But the ones who do, including NHS Tayside, indicate they account for most of the cases. One health board, NHS Lothian, say no mental health patients have left their wards. They say this is because they keep the ward doors locked. Police Scotland said it was a matter for the individual health boards.
Each case can create a significant drain on police resources.
But the Scottish Police Federation, which represents officers, say searching for missing patients puts pressure on policing.
Having experienced many of these types of inquiries myself as a supervisor in Aberdeen, I can tell you that they do create a significant resource. They usually involve removing police officers from other aspects of their duties and focusing in on this particular issue until it has been resolved.
The Scottish Government say it is committed to reducing the number of suicides.
I want to extend my heartfelt sympathies to the families who've lost a loved one. I'm very clear that the safety of patients is a priority, and of course that staff need to carefully balance the right for patients to be protected together with their right for liberty. So it's very difficult balance for them to attain.
Go Jade, go Jade, go Jade, yay!
Samantha now hopes to start rebuilding her life after her 5-year battle with the NHS. She says it was a battle she fought for Jade.
I can close this chapter. You know, this is something that's been hanging over my head since she died. And I really didn't realise the extent to which it was weighing on me until we got that letter of apology. I feel like I'm able to let that side of it go. I fought for my daughter. I didn't let them get away with what they did.
Jade McGrath's mum, Samantha, ending that report from Gordon Blackstock. Now, some of the day's other stories now. Homicides here have fallen to their lowest level since the 1970s. Police Scotland say that 48 were recorded in the 12 months up until April, compared to 52 the previous year. Figures released today also show a fall in the number of assaults on police officers. A 31-year-old man has been charged with attempted murder and serious sexual assault of a woman in Cove near Aberdeen. The incident happened around 9:15 on Saturday evening. Police activity at the scene is continuing. Now, CalMac's boss is in South Uist at the moment to hear directly from people who are angry about the ferry operator's decision to cancel sailings to Mallaig for the rest of this month. And our reporter Katie Hunter is just back from covering this story in South Uist. Katie, just remind us why the service has been dropped.
Well, the service that normally covers the South Uist to Mallaig route, the ferry, has been redeployed elsewhere, and that's because of ongoing maintenance and repair issues with other vessels. And as a result, local businesses say they're missing out on much needed revenue from tourists who would be coming to the island at what would normally be a really busy time of year. Now, this afternoon, CalMac's chief executive met some business owners in South Uist. That meeting was in private. We weren't allowed to film it. But then afterwards, locals did give him a bit of a grilling outside and question him about what's going on, because they say that they are just fed up with this disruption and that businesses are really struggling and in some cases failing.
So what has the boss of CalMac been saying in response then?
Well, CalMac has what's called a prioritisation matrix, or a formula that it uses to decide which ferry goes where when there's disruption. So Robbie Drummond has confirmed today that there will be a review of this matrix and how different islands are prioritised when there are problems on the ferry network. As for the Scottish Government, Transport Scotland has given us a statement saying it's acutely aware of the issues in South Uist and it's engaging directly with affected communities. And finally, the First Minister, Hamza Yusuf, said today that he'll be appointing a new Transport Minister imminently. That's after Kevin Stewart resigned on health grounds last week.
Yeah, of course. OK, thank you very much, Katie. Now, tonight's main news again. First Minister will not suspend Nicola Sturgeon from the SNP following her arrest and release in connection with an investigation into the party's funding and finances.
And coming up in the sport, a former Scotland manager says the team's victory over Spain will terrify future opponents ahead of this weekend's European Championship qualifier against Norway.
Now, it looks like any other lorry, but this is actually the first electrically powered one that's making regular deliveries here. Distillers Chivas Brothers are now using it to take whisky from their bottling plant near Dumbarton to a warehouse in North Ayrshire. Here's our environment correspondent, Kevin Keane.
Silence is golden, and you'd hardly think we were in the cab of a 44-ton heavy goods vehicle. In fact, this is the first in Scotland to be powered by electricity. 5 batteries on board with room for more.
There is no noise from this vehicle at all. There's no engine noise. It drives very, very quietly on the road. You get to hear other things coming. You hear other vehicles on the road, whereas you might not before. So in terms of safety, it's actually a step forward.
What do drivers think of it?
They love it. They absolutely love it. Drivers always like getting a new vehicle, but to have something groundbreakingly new, such as the first 44-ton battery vehicle, is something quite special.
The first electric truck will travel between this bottling plant near Dumbarton and one of the company's warehouses in North Ayrshire. It'll be used to transport whisky casks. Not a long trip, but one which the company says will save 150 tonnes of carbon a year.
Yeah, we're certainly hoping it's ideal for that, because the round trip's about 50 miles. The truck's got a range of between 250 and 300 miles, so it will be quite a full day. 5 trips a day, return trips a day is quite a good utilisation of the vehicle, so it's almost perfectly matched with what we're going to try and get out of it.
So in terms of design, it doesn't look to me much different to a diesel truck. What's different?
Well, great observation. It's actually not very different from a diesel truck at all.
The similarity is deliberate, so drivers need minimal training. The batteries sit here behind the cab, and the manufacturer says there are more of these to come.
I think in terms of the potential is vast. The truck that we have here is predominantly a regional distribution truck, and we see that battery electric taking up a large space in the urban and regional distribution sector. When it comes into longer trucks and longer distances, we need different alternatives.
Lowering transport emissions is vital in tackling climate change, and this is another step on that journey. Kevin Keane reporting Scotland, Dumbarton.
OK, let's get tonight's sport now with Amy Irons over here in your new home, in our new surroundings.
New home, Laura, but still the same team.
Yeah,
of course.
Absolutely. And we're talking Scotland.
We certainly are. It doesn't feel like that long ago, does it, since that iconic victory that Scotland recorded over Spain. So there's a real buzz around the men's national side, and we've got a big game coming up this weekend.
Yeah, good.
Thanks very much. Hello there. With still 5 days to go until Scotland resume their bid to reach next year's Euros. But the build-up has begun, with former national team manager Alex McLeish saying countries are now terrified of facing Steve Clarke's side. Scotland sit top of their qualifying group with maximum points from 2 games, including a famous victory, as we mentioned, against Spain. Next up is a trip to Oslo to play Norway on Saturday, with recent results pointing to growing optimism that the team can reach successive European Championships.
I think we've become a little bit fearful for a lot of countries, you know, that are going to play against Scotland because of recent results, and the Spanish one elevated us to another level. The fact that we've beaten Spain, I think, has probably got everybody terrified of playing against Scotland. So we've now got that status.
It's certainly given everyone a boost, hasn't it? Well, if Scotland win in Oslo, they'll forge an 8-point gap over Norway. But to do so, they will have to keep this man quiet. Erling Haaland, arguably the world's best striker.
He wasn't playing the World Cup, so he had time to rest. So I think that also made him do well at the end of this season. And people say, yeah, I haven't scored in so many games. But I mean, his average is just tremendous. So, and when he says that he will be fit and ready for Saturday, I think he will be.
Scotland fans will be hoping that is not the case. Well, sticking with football, St Mirren manager Stephen Robinson has signed a new contract that will see him lead the Premiership side for another 3 seasons. The former Motherwell boss took charge in Paisley back in February last year and led St Mirren into the top 6 of the Premiership this season for the first time, their best league placing since back in 1985. To tennis, and it's been quite a while since Andy Murray was winning tournaments on a regular basis, which made his victory in the Surbiton even sweeter for his kids who'd been nagging the Scot it was time to bring home a trophy. Murray wrapped up what he described as the perfect start to his Wimbledon preparations with a straight sets defeat of Yuri Rodionov to claim his first grass court title in 7 years. The former world #1 will now head to a tournament in Nottingham before returning to the Queen's Club ahead of his tilt at a 3rd Wimbledon crown. Finally, boxing, and Josh Taylor insists he won't quit the sport but says he might have to move up in weight as the Scot reflects on his world title fight to Teofimo Lopez in New York. Former undisputed world champion Taylor lost the last of his 4 belts at Madison Square Garden on a unanimous points decision. That was the first defeat of his professional career, but the 32-year-old says he will return to the ring.
I've had a great run. I've had a brilliant run. I mean, who else in the UK has done what I've done, achieved what I've achieved, the run the way I've done it? So I am very proud of myself. And
well, you heard it there, Laura. He will be back. It's obviously tough to take for Josh. You know, his first defeat in 20 professional bouts. But
absolutely. Sounded positive enough, though. OK, thanks, Amy.
Thank you.
Well, now it's over to Laura and Nick to find out what's happening on the BBC Scotland channel at 9 o'clock.
Tonight, more reaction as SNP leader Humza Yousaf says he won't suspend Nicola Sturgeon from the party.
Island communities have been crying out for more engagement with CalMac. We will speak to one of the people who met the ferry company.
And from the red carpet of her new movie in London, we hear from Hollywood A-lister Jennifer Lawrence.
Join us at 9.
OK, let's get tonight's weather now. Here's Chris.
Good evening. It's been a warm or very warm start to the week for many parts of the country with some sunshine, bit of cloud and also a lively start to the week in a few areas with thundery downpours, particularly across the Highlands. A Met Office yellow warning still in force for the next few hours with those thunderstorms still with us and perhaps a few across the northeast as we head overnight. Generally overnight though, it's dry with some clear skies, a bit of mist and low cloud in towards the Inverness area around northern coast, quite a humid night, temperatures for some holding in the teens. So to tomorrow, and it's a dry, sunny start to the day. Any early cloud, any early low cloud will burn off. And then once again, the sunshine gets to work, so a Met Office yellow warning once again for the risk of thundery downpours. Where they occur, hail, thunder, gusty winds. Elsewhere, it's mostly dry, always warmest in the west with temperatures mid to high 20s, a little bit cooler, a little bit fresher in the east, certainly around the coast. Any low cloud around northern coast should have burnt away, but you can see the rash of those thundery downpours through the course of the afternoon. A little more cloud across Orkney and Shetland with temperatures here in the low to mid-teens. Tomorrow evening, those showers fade away, but some low cloud begins to move back in around some North Sea coast because midweek we've still got high pressure overhead, but a bit of a drift coming in off the North Sea, meaning some of that cloud will reform around the eastern coast. It should burn back through the day. Elsewhere, plenty of dry, fine, sunny and warm or very warm weather, hot in a few spots. In the west, that's where we'll see the highest values, 26, 27 degrees. Once again, a little bit cooler around the coast and indeed across the Isles. Now, for a heat wave in Scotland, we need to see 25 Celsius or more 3 days running, and a few spots have already reached that threshold, and we're likely to see a few further spots reaching that, certainly through west central Scotland through this week. So here's Thursday, once again dry and sunny and warmest in the west with temperatures mid to high 20s, a little bit cooler elsewhere, certainly around the coast. You can see on the outlook there lots of dry and sunny weather to be had, and temperatures for some in the mid to high 20s. That's the forecast.
Now tonight's main news again. Nicola Sturgeon won't be suspended from the SNP, says Humza Yousaf. It follows the arrest and release of the former First Minister yesterday by police investigating SNP funding and finances. The BBC has found there have been over 6,000 cases of patients leaving hospital wards here in the past 5 years. And the boss of CalMac has met residents of South Uist who are angry at the ferry operator's decision to cancel sailings to Malig for the rest of this month. And that is Reporting Scotland. I will be back with your late news at 10:30 tonight. Until then, from everyone in the team, enjoy your evening. Good night.